This is TLV1.
The Tel Aviv Review.
Hello and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review, a program dedicated to words, thought and debate. I'm your host, Gilad Halper.
And I'm your co-host, Dastalia Shenlin. Every week we talk about books and research and other things that have caught our attention. Today's episode is brought to you by the Israel Democracy Institute, an independent center of research and action dedicated to strengthening the foundations of Israeli democracy. Our guest today is Professor Yedidia Stern. He is the Vice President of Research at the Israel Democracy Institute. He is a full professor and former Dean of the Law Faculty of Bar Ilan University. He's been deeply engaged in public affairs in Israel, including sitting on government commissions as an advisor to the Ministry of Justice, and formerly the president of the Institute for the Advanced Study of Israeli Judaism at Bar Ilan University. We'll be talking today about his various publications and articles related to very topical issues, including the nation-state law, the nature of religion and state in Israel, the balance of powers in Israel, and the independence of the judiciary. You know, I always say it's those little things about life here that make Israel a charming place. Professor Stern, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon.
So tell us, if you had your way, how would you define Israel as a Jewish and democratic state? What does that mean to you?
I would add another element to the definition, which is equality. Jewish, democratic, and equal state. What does it really mean? It's open for interpretation, obviously. When you talk about democracy, many people think they know what they're talking about, but anyhow, you can go to any library and find out what does it really mean. But when you ask yourself, what does it really mean a Jewish state, then you have no past experience to look at.
Well, except for several thousand years ago.
Yeah, but that's almost not relevant. So show me the book that you can open up and read and know, and there's no such a book. So this is a challenge of our time. What do we do with the fact that we are the nation state of the people, of the Jewish nation? It is not only a demographic definition of the state, meaning many Jews are living here, the majority. It's much more than that. It has to do, I think, with the nature of the public sphere here in Israel. What does it really mean that you go out of your community, from your home, into a public sphere, and this is a Jewish place? What does it really mean? We are sitting in a place. This studio is located in Kikar HaMedina, okay, which is, in English, the...
I normally call it Place de la République.
Okay.
But Gilad flatters us all. It's literally the square of the state.
Right. And the name of the street, Dalia?
Hey Ba'iyar.
What does it really mean?
Yeah, that's the date upon which the state was
so
proclaimed.
Is this enough to define our Jewishness? It's part of it. It's not enough. I'm struggling in English because I was raised in Hebrew. Is this part of the Jewish state? Yes, it is. Renaissance of the language and the culture of the Jewish nation. It's happening right here in Israel. Is that enough? Not necessarily.
But why is it not just a reflection of the demographic reality, as you say? You said it's more than that. Why not?
Yeah, because I believe, and this is crucial, that the Jewish nation and the Jewish religion and the Jewish culture were shut down in the diaspora. We had our Jewish identity as individuals, as families, in our congregation, but we never, 2,000 years, we never had the opportunity to rule according to Jewish style of life, behavior, and collective memory.
But is rule the same as culture? I mean, hey, you're talking to a diaspora Jew right here who has now been here for 21 years, and I can say with great authority that we have culture, a Jewish culture abroad.
Sure, of course you have. I'm not saying that Jewishness outside of Israel is not relevant. Obviously, it is. All of us were in the diaspora for 2,000 years. Our generation, my generation, has the first time in 2,000 years the option to translate and to express our Jewishness in a different way, on a different level, on a different sphere. And this is the major challenge of the state of Israel. And what does it really mean? This is the ongoing debate, unsolved yet, for us.
What does it do to Jewish peoplehood? You know, they say about Britain and America that they're two countries separated by a common language. And you can say the same about Israeli Jews and diaspora Jews, right? They are two communities separated by a common religion in a way. How does all this, you know, the way that Zionism is deployed in the Jewish state and, you know, the Jewish features of the country, what does it do to Jewish peoplehood?
First of all, since we have to make decisions here in Israel that will apply to everybody, that's the meaning of a state, that's one rule of law, we have to make decisions that are binding different visions. that are according to some vision and against other vision of the citizens of the State of Israel. If you're an American Jew, you don't have to make such a decision. You make your life the way you want it to be. You join or you go away from any kind of relationship with the community, and that's fine. Here, you cannot escape the decision of the state that has to do with power. For example, personal law. How do you connect yourself to another person and create a family? Israeli law is deciding on this, and it is being decided by the state using one interpretation of Judaism. So obviously we have a different challenge. It's interesting, actually. The leaders of political Zionism before the state, who were usually secular, thought that the puzzle of Jewish identity will be understood to us, a Jewish nation, once we'll have a state. They thought that the reason for the puzzle is that, some of us are in Yemen, some of us are in Ukraine, some of us are in New York, so there's a puzzle. We'll be collected to one space. We'll talk the same language, Hebrew. We'll share responsibility. We'll have the same army. The puzzle will be solved. They were so wrong. Just the opposite. Because once you are together and you must make decisions together, you have to choose. And since we do not share the same vision of what does it really mean to be a Jew and what does it really mean to have a Jewish state, we have ongoing fights.
There's several issues you raised here, but one is this idea that there's a certain Jewish culture that flows from sovereignty. Is it just expressing itself in personal law? You also started out with sort of the cultural rhythm of life here around the calendar. What are the other aspects of Jewish culture that are specifically a feature of sovereignty?
Yeah, first of all, beside of the calendar and the language, we have to make distribution of land between the citizens of the state. Do we prefer Jews over others? A question which is debated today while we're talking right now in the Knesset, in the Israeli parliament. One may say, how is that relevant? Other people say, no, this land was bought by Jewish money through the Kakal, Keren Kemet Israel. So
Jewish National Fund.
Yeah, so you have to use it according to the wishes of those who bought it. One expression of it. Second expression of it, of debate, which is going on right now here in Israel. If this state is a nation state of the Jews, what is our responsibility and commitment to people who are not citizens of the state of Israel, but part of the Jewish nation? Do we have any commitment, and what does it really mean?
And conversely, what is our commitment
to
the non-Jewish citizens of Israel?
Sorry,
because
we had to say that together. Citizens who are not Jews.
You said that if it was up to you, it would be Jewish, democratic, and equal.
That's right.
Right? So equal, I'm assuming it's not only to Jews, it's, some more equal than others.
That's the reason for the equal here.
So there is a tension between the two. And in a way, they could be mutually exclusive, because if there's complete equality between everybody, therefore a Jew should not have any sort of precedence.
Are you taller than me?
I am taller than you. I'm taller than most people.
That's a competition, though. I just want everybody to know that is a competition.
Is much prettier than I am.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're not equal.
I mean, that is just so subjective.
So we're not equal. Forget about full equality. It is not in existence anywhere. However, it's an ambition.
No, but equality before the law, it's different, right?
Exactly. And let me elaborate a little bit, okay? First of all, I am committed to equality. And I think Israel should be committed to equality. However, if equality means that we will have to share everything the same way, but it will cost me my dream, which is the most important dream of my life, then this is a tragedy. Therefore, Yeshaya Berlin, the philosopher, political philosopher,
Isaiah Berlin,
as other people said, equality is very important, but you have to balance it with other values. Now, for me, Yedidia, the story of my life is the idea that I was lucky enough to be living in a generation and in a place where Jewish life has to do with the state. I'm lucky. Now, if equality will be interpreted in a way that will shut down this voice, then as a Jew I'll never have a public sphere elsewhere. And I think this justifies treating differently different citizens, not on a civic level, but on a symbolic level.
In terms of national symbols?
In terms of national symbols, in terms of understanding that we cannot share fully, for example, the law of return. We cannot share fully the meaning of the state. This is a tragedy to those who are non-Jews. That's why I want to add to the definition equality. But the meaning of equality will not be, if it will be, according to my wishes, collective rights, but individual rights, which will give every citizen in Israel equal right to every resource, including the land, which I mentioned earlier. But am I going to give up my symbols? Am I going to give up my wish to push forward Jewish ideas into the Israeli decision-making on everything? No, it shouldn't.
You could also present that in the opposite way, which is to say you would advance equality on every level with one limitation, and that's on the symbolic level.
It's not only symbolic, it's the nature of the state. Part of it is symbolic, part of it might be law of return is not symbolic, it's practical.
That's true. But that's who gets in. You're saying in terms of what happens inside, once you're in the door.
Put it this way. If in order to achieve equality, you have to delete the Jewish nation or the state, I am against equality. But if, according to equality, what you need to do is to treat fairly, on equal terms, private citizens, disregarding their nationality, I'm for it.
Well, let's see. So why have you been such an outspoken critic of the nation-state law as it is now? And get me if you can give us a little bit of background for listeners who aren't following every detail.
Yeah. First of all, the idea that Israel is a nation-state of the Jewish people is undisputable. Almost nobody in Israel will say this is not true. Some Arabs will say, and some extreme leftists in Israel, but the majority, vast majority, 90% for sure, will say it's obvious. And this is true also with the UN and with the international community. So what is the need to declare it again and again and again?
In a law, and even a basic law.
Right. It is written 6 times, no less, in the Declaration of Independence. So what is the motivation here?
What is the motivation?
So that's question number 1. I'm suspicious. I'm afraid that this specific bill intends not to strengthen the nature of the State of Israel as a home of the Jewish people, but the purpose is to say to Israelis who are Arabs, this is not your home. The difference between being a national and hypernational or supranational is how you look at your specific characters. If you want to say, this is what I am, then you are national. If you want to say, but you are not part of me, and that's the point, then you're becoming leumani in Hebrew, which is nationalistic, and this is improper. Now, this specific bill is going, I think, in the wrong way, because it says, first of all, that Israeli Arabs can use their Arabic, but it will not be an official language of the state, which is the current situation right now, number 1.
So and demoting the status of the Arabic language?
Yeah, downgrading it. And number 2, which is still open while we're talking, and I'm not sure what will happen, but there is a serious attempt to say that communities will be able not to accept people who are not Jews if they decide so into them.
But isn't this a farce because that law already exists?
Not true. The law that exists has many, I would say, qualification in using it.
Okay, let's just give our listeners a little bit of background. There is a law that is called the Communities Law, which allows for a small acceptance committee to decide to reject people from small communities based on their character.
Right.
It does not allow them to reject people based on normal things like race or sexual orientation or religion, but character. So that's sort of overlapping the current discussion about
Some would say it's a euphemism.
Yes, it might be. That's true. Israeli Supreme Court decided to approve this law by majority vote. Not everybody agreed. And yes, you should be suspicious of this law as well. But right now what they're trying to do is much more. They're trying to say, not only a small community, but every community will be able to say no to whoever based on nothing without any criteria in the law. This is racism and shouldn't pass by.
Isn't all this that we're talking about the downside of not having a constitution?
Yes.
Our founding fathers made this terrible mistake by leaving everything up in the air and everything up for grabs, and now we're dealing with the consequences.
But was it a mistake or just a failure?
Yeah.
They tried.
I don't think they really tried, did they?
Well, there's debate what happened then, but if you ask me, I believe Ben-Gurion smartly understood that in order to build this country, you need to leave the executive the full power to do whatever they want. He understood that the legal intervention in what he's doing with the power of a constitution will limit him from doing big things. And he was this kind of character. But whatever happened then doesn't matter now. We do not have a constitution. Listen to this. We do not have known borders. Nobody knows where Israel ends. Okay, number one. Number two, we have open interpretation to everything of the nature of the state. That's what we are debating right now. Jewish, democratic, equal, we don't know. We don't have Bill of Rights. Even equality itself, not disregarding what I just said, the idea of equality is not secured by Israeli law today.
By any Israeli law?
No, some of it does exist, but not on the level that binds everything, okay? And on and on and on. So we are living on a shifting sands to some degree, which is fun, Everything is flexible, but obviously very dangerous. The Supreme Court of the State of Israel, which is the most important, I think, institution that secure liberal values in Israel and the character, the democratic character of the state, can be easily stripped out of its authority by a regular law, a regular vote in the Knesset. Obviously, this is tempting to those who want to go against the court. So far, so good. Whatever the attacks are against the Israeli court, they were not so successful so far. But you never know what will happen in the future. We see what's going on in Hungary and in Poland and to some degree even in the States.
Well, you've raised a very interesting point. You say that the court is such an important safeguard of liberal values and that we need some greater anchor for concepts of equality. But what if we're just in the minority? What if the Israeli people and leaders do not want a liberal society? What if they want some sort of a democracy that is not rooted in liberal democratic values? Who are we to say you must?
You're right.
We can pack up and go home.
This is not the case.
Where's home for you?
I don't know.
Dalia, this is not the case.
Know.
I want people to understand this is not the case. Israel is a traditional place, conservative place. People tend to vote for hawkish governments lately.
Most of the last 40 years.
Yes, nevertheless, I believe that Israeli society is balanced. And I think that most of Israelis, and we know it as a fact, are committed to liberal values.
What are you including in those?
Number one on their list, on the Israeli list, is the freedom of expression. Israelis and Jews love to debate. Nobody can shut them up. And we have a
But that's also starting to erode now.
I don't think so. From what we see, people are willing to sacrifice a lot in order to keep their opinion being heard. The political participation is very high compared to any other country, which is a very good sign for democracy. We have to put everything in perspective. When you look into Freedom House Index, they measure democracies. We are in the upper third. When you compare us to the OECD countries, which are the developed one, we are also better than the average. Israeli society is a vibrant society.
But Gilad's right. We have gone down in some of the rankings in recent years.
A little bit. Some of it we are going up, some of it we are going down. Obviously, we have weaknesses. I'm not trying to say the opposite, but I want to put it in perspective. I feel that after 70 years of independence, Israel achieved enormous achievements on the physical aspects of life. When you talk about army, when you talk about economy, obviously startup nation, etc., etc. The main challenge of next generation of Zionists is the issue of identity. How to maintain differences in society. We have at least 4 different visions of the ultra-orthodox, of Israeli Arabs, of the religious and the secular, at least 4 different visions. How to maintain the discussion without eroding solidarity and the common purpose of the state to achieve more achievements for the Jewish people and for the citizens of the State of Israel.
Well, this leads to sort of critiques on both directions. Let me just start because, why not? This will be fun. With the arguments of the government, right? And the argument of the government is that, and not just the government, I hear people who identify with the government and support this government saying, the democratic part of the state has gone too far. We need to balance it and make sure that we strengthen the Jewish side of the equation. And that's why we need this nation-state law. Why do you say they're wrong? Maybe they just think that democracy has gone too far with all of its meanings.
Okay, so first of all, it's true that many Israelis think that Israel is too democratic, and many Israelis feel that Israel is too Jewish. So we are in between, which is the good place to be in, I think. So the criticism is coming from both directions. If you'll spend Friday a month ago in Tel Aviv, you'll see 250,000 people marching on the Pride Gay Parade. Bigger than anywhere in Europe, not to mention the rest of the world. This is Israel today. So some people feel it's too democratic for them. They don't feel at home when this is happening. But this is happening. On the other hand, come here on Yom Kippur or even on Shabbat, and see that the public sphere of Tel Aviv, not to mention Jerusalem, looks different. So some people feel this is too Jewish. Fine. We have different visions. We have different understanding of what is the right. Sometimes your dream is my nightmare and vice versa, but we have to live together and to find a way to do that in a proper way. So a constitution which is smart enough to maintain differences is the remedy that we should look.
Okay, but let's try the criticism from the other side before we move on to the other key issues, which is the following. You have talked about the need for equality as anchored in law. On the other hand, you are very clear about privileging the Jewish identity aspect of the state. How can you reconcile those two at a time when the Arab minority, the Palestinian citizens of Israel, do not have any place that is a state to realize their own identity?
First of all, I agree that once we will have a Palestinian state, nation state for the Palestinian people, it will be much easier, our case. That's true. That's why I'm for it. Not only because of that, but this is part of the deal. And I think most Israelis will agree when the option will be realistic. That's my interpretation of what...
To a Palestinian state.
Yes.
Well, you are right. As a pollster, I can say with authority that people's vision of how feasible it is closely linked to their support.
Yes. And we have a problem here that we don't see how it will actually happen. Who is a partner and how can you trust a partner, etc., etc. I don't go into this. But your basic assumption is that if we have two nation states, our ability to justify our own nation state will be strengthened. That's true.
But is it happening anytime soon?
I don't know. Who am I to say?
No, but you are saying that Israel should define itself clearly, symbolically as a Jewish state, even though we have no fulfillment in sight for our
Let me make it very clear. My opinion is that Jews are allowed to have a nation state disregarding anything. As a Jew, as a Democrat, and as a liberal, I would wish and I would work for the possibility that the other side of the people who live here will have their own place. Is that a veto power that I'm going to give them? No. I don't think we should give them this veto power. We should work together to allow it.
Okay, now let's move on to another issue that we touched upon several points during this conversation. That is the prosthetic limb that we Israelis have. I'm sorry, no offense to anyone. But
That is a bizarre metaphor.
The Jewish diaspora, right?
Prosthetic limb sounds like you've lost a limb.
It's part of our body, but not really. That's what I mean.
The fifth tribe.
The fifth tribe. Okay, fair enough. The thing is that much of the contention revolves around religious pluralism because in overwhelming measure they are pro-Israel, even those who come and protest, the if not now crowd and such, do it out of some sort of attachment and engagement with Israel.
They care enough to be angry.
Exactly, precisely. But the question of religious pluralism and the fact that there is an Orthodox monopoly in Israel is the bone of contention here. And my question to you is, there's always been an Orthodox monopoly on religious issues in Israel, and the diaspora, especially the American diaspora, has always been predominantly non-Orthodox. Why has it become such an issue recently and not before?
Yeah, I think that the ultra-Orthodox in Israel are becoming more and more dominant in Israeli politics and more hungry for power. You can see it all over the place. Number one. Number two, I feel that American Jews are not willing to be pushed over in Israel. And to some degree, American Jews who made Aliyah and live here are pushing this attention or making it more and more clear that this is not fair, what's going on. So you have people pushing for both sides. On top of all of this, you have to realize that in America and in Israel, the culture of how to handle disagreements is deteriorating. And this influences everything. We are basically in a cultural war here in Israel, and the same is happening more and more so in America. I just gave a lecture to cadets from West Point last week, and they asked me an interesting question. Since you Israelis are fighting for such a long time, and we are just starting our fight in America, what is the lesson you can give us, Israelis, about how to handle our discussions or disputes in America? Anyhow, so I feel we are going into an era that people do not agree to listen. I think internet has to do with it, because to some degree we talk to each other in the internet. We do not listen to other voices. And there are many factors here.
No, but Reform Jews have never had any sort of recognition in Israel. Is it just because they are perhaps have bigger chutzpah now to stand up and demand?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say
rights?
that they're not accepted because of a new disagreement. They have been fighting for increasing agreement, respect over decades. And many of them, in the States, when I go around, will say, so is all the contributions we've been making and all of the activism we've been contributing to helping? How are Israelis, responding to the reform and conservative movements? And it's very hard to see any change here.
I think that the importance of the State of Israel in the eyes of American Jewry is huge. To some degree, it defines identities. And they are being more and more disappointed by what's going on here. When we Israelis are not listening to their needs, we are slapping on the face.
Okay, so let me be the devil's advocate here for a second and ask you, why should they have a stake? I mean, they can always come to Israel. They're well welcome, right? They can move to Israel and become citizens overnight. They would probably more or less be welcomed with open arms. And then they can influence. They can become part of the Israeli body politic and care even more about Israel. I am an Anglophile, right? I lived in the UK. I care deeply about that country. I'm a British citizen, and nobody cares or should care about my vehement opposition to Brexit, right? Why should the case of American Jews be different?
Okay, first of all, I agree that they should not have the same voice like Israelis. They do not pay tax here. They do not send their kids to the army. And they will not be influenced the same way that I'll be influenced if Israel will decide something. So obviously, they're not equal partners with regard to decisions made by the State of Israel. That's clear. Nevertheless, when you talk about issues of identity, when Israel proclaims that it is not just the state of Israelis, but the state of the Jewish nation, then parts of the Jewish nation feel, okay, it means something, and they feel that, yes, Israel is in a way, in a remote way, our homeland. So whenever Israel is making decisions that exclude them, they feel betrayed, and I understand that. So yes, I would not like, as some suggested, that the diaspora Jews will send their representative to the Knesset. There is a suggestion like that. I think this is not true. This is not
You
right.
mean to deal with anything or specifically on
With
religious
anything.
pluralism?
So what sort of
10%.
arrangement do you think should be reached?
So first of all, I don't think that we should not listen to them or listen always to them. We have to have a dialogue and discussion. Whenever we're talking about definitions of religion in Israel, they do have a claim. They want their kids to be recognized as part of their nation. We Israelis, what do we think about it? They do some religious acts like a marriage. Do we recognize this kind of marriage here in Israel, yes or no? This is relevant to their life, and I think we should consider this seriously. But it's even more clear that we have to respect the streams of non-Orthodox Jews who live in Israel and treat them equally. At least
Which is the vast majority.
No, here in Israel.
Yeah.
Those who live in Israel.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of Jews are
secular.
not even secular. I mean, the majority of Jews are not ultra-Orthodox, of course, the vast majority. And even a majority of Jews are not ultra-Orthodox or national religious.
Yes, Dalia, but those who are not consider themselves as religious, they say that their religion is the Orthodoxy in Israel. You have to
Right.
realize
The
this.
synagogue they don't go to is
Exactly.
Orthodox, right?
So, but nevertheless, I mean, we have to use whatever we give to religion practice in Israel per capita according to the beliefs of the people. And we do not do that right.
And is it down to the goodwill of our leaders, or do you think there should be some sort of institutional mechanism?
You cannot trust the leaders on this because their political survival depends on the ultra-Orthodox, as we know it. Ultra-Orthodox are right now about 10%. In the future, they will be about 22, 23%. They have veto power on basically everything in Israel because they are willing to give this, to go to a coalition if they will be given control over religion state issues. Therefore, what needs to be done, and that's practical issue, we have to raise the awareness of Israelis of all sorts to the fact that we are slapping on the face of our brothers abroad if we give in to the ultra-Orthodox demands on religion state issues. Is it a last case? I think it is not a last case.
But I want to go back to a point that you started to make before about what are the limits of influence of the diaspora Jewry. You're basically you've written in some of your articles that you understand the claim that they have to issues of religious pluralism in Israel, but they should draw the line and they shouldn't be taking a position on things like national security and Israel's policies. However, I want to question can you really make that distinction? Because so much of Israel's policies on security issues, which are also conflict-related issues, are driven by a religious vision, sometimes a messianic vision, in the name of Judaism. And this is where you have movements in the U.S., specifically left-wing movements, saying, not in our name as Jews. Now, if this country...
Give me an example, Dalia.
Settlement expansion is primarily driven by religious communities.
Not anymore.
Ultra-orthodox is the highest growing population in the settlements.
Okay. Half of the settlers are not religious right now, while we're talking. And it's true that originally the settlement movement was, pushed by a messianic vision of the first settlers. Not anymore. I don't think that the head of the Beit Yehudi, Bennett, or number 2 on this religious party, Ayelet Shaked, have any messianic bone in the body. They interpret Israeli geopolitical situation, and they are nationalists, and they feel that's what needs to be done. We need this as a...
They don't call it messianism, but they call it fulfillment of the Jewish vision. And as you know very well from all the survey research that the Israel Democracy Institute does, people's level of how religious they are is very, very strongly determining whether they believe that we should be expanding in those areas and continuing this policy. And if it was up to the secular population, we probably would have a two-state solution right now, again, looking at the numbers. And probably we would have no less of a culturally Jewish environment in Israel because, as you point out, the seculars are perfectly culturally Jewish. They do their ritual things. So this is being done certainly from public perceptions and often political rhetoric in the name of the Jewish, historical, biblical, ancient. Maybe it's not messianic anymore, but A, parts of it still are, B, the ultra-Orthodox growth, and the public sort of people who are more religious are driving this. So Jews around the world do feel this is being done in their name. How do you draw that line and say, well, diaspora Jews shouldn't have a stake?
First of all, the point is that in the Jewish history, nation, and religion were intertwined. Ben Gurion and his era tried to undo this and tried to replace religion with nationhood. And I don't know if our listeners know, but, on Ben Gurion's doorstep, there was no mezuzah.
I didn't know.
Not because he forgot about it. And he never married halachically his wife, Paula. And he did all this on purpose because he felt that religion is a problem for the renaissance of the Jewish people as a collective. So this was his idea. Today, you cannot find many Israelis who will believe this way. And many Israelis interpret their identity as a mixture of some kind of tradition, religion, each one a different kind of balancing and nationality. So I cannot go with you, Dalia, with the argument this is based on religion. It is not like that. I think I'm religious myself. When I read the Declaration of Independence and Ben Gurion was behind it, I see religion in the document. I see it over there, despite the fact that Ben Gurion was behind this document, amazing document. So it is not so easy to make a distinction here. Anyhow, I believe that Israeli policy in the last 40 years is based on security, on understanding of what needs to be done in order to maintain our independence. And I don't think that religion is important on foreign issues and security issues in Israel.
Okay, I agree with you. I don't think religion is...
I don't.
I don't think it is important. What is important is how much non-religious people care, right? And you said that you don't think it's a lost cause to rally some sort of public pressure on changing the attitude towards diaspora Jews. But secular Israelis or non-religious Israelis, those who don't really care about religion or the Orthodox monopoly, don't even rally to do something that affects them even more, and that is how not being able to have civil marriage in Israel.
It's an amazing fact.
Yeah. So, I mean, even before they can think about being kind and gracious to their brothers abroad, they're not even kind and gracious to themselves by, rising up and demanding some sort of change. Is it not a lost cause? To me, it sounds like...
It's not a lost cause because...
Cyprus isn't that far.
No, I'm saying here... Listen, first of all, you're describing it the right way. I mean, Israelis basically gave up on these issues for religious people. And I must tell you something interesting. Most of the activists from freedom of religion and freedom from religion in Israel are people like myself who are Orthodox and liberal. These are the main activists here in Israel, which is a shame.
That was religious Zionism in the very early start, right?
To my interpretation, and apparently yours. Okay, some people say differently. But the idea...
Because they cared enough about religion and cared enough about Zionism not to mix them.
Right. Yeah. But even more bizarre, because many Jews here in Israel are more and more interested in their religious identity. And you see the renaissance of reading the Bible and interested in basic text in the Jewish bookshelf, etc., but it is not being translated into an issue of debates, specific debate of the norms in our life. But evidently it will happen. And I'm all for it.
What will happen? The separation?
No, not separation. What? I'm against separation. I don't think separation will happen here, because it will dilute the Jewish nature of the state, but more open interpretation of the meaning of religion in Israel and the relationship between this interpretation and the norms in Israel.
So greater pluralism.
Conversion, Shabbat, family law, etc., etc., etc.
I just want to clarify, for the record, what I was saying before is basically an agreement. I mean, maybe I would portray what I was trying to say as more of an argument for separating between religious Judaism as a religion, and state policy, because the disagreement I have is that I do think Jewish religion is either being used or is driving many people's support of Israel's policy. It's not just about security. And I think that is why, my point is not to sound like religion is the reason for all of this, but that it is certainly a driving factor of why we continue these policies.
Fair enough.
All right. Okay. And on this note, Dalia and Yedidia, we'll wrap up.
Since we've solved everything.
Yedidia Stern, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
And also thanks to Gizem Ozdemir, our sound engineer, and to Itai Shelem, our producer, and of course the Israel Democracy Institute for the support of this series. And now we've got a request. Most of you listen to us on the Apple Podcasts app, and we would like to ask you this. Please consider writing us a review. Just launch the app, select our podcast in the library section, scroll down to ratings and review, and then press write a review, and then, of course, write one. Check out our archive. It has more than 450 interviews. If you like us here, you can also like us on Facebook. Our page is called the Tel Aviv Review Podcast, Ideas from Israel. And, of course, follow me and Dalia on Twitter. Join us again next week for another edition of the Tel Aviv Review. And until then...